Hi, this is Pastor Josh from First Baptist DeQueen. As we are reading through the Bible every day this year, trying to do these live streams as often as we can. So far, we've been able to do it every day thus far. And if you want to go get caught up on those, we have them all on a podcast on our YouTube channel that you can go and find and check out and get caught up with those. But today we are on day 20, beginning in Genesis chapter 41, verse 17. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Behold, in my dream I was standing on the banks of the Nile. 7 cows, plump and attractive, came up out of the Nile and fed in the reed grass. 7 other cows came up after them, poor and very ugly and thin, such as I had never seen in all the land of Egypt. And the thin, ugly cows ate up the first 7 plump cows. But when they had eaten them, no one would have known that they had eaten them, for they were still as ugly as at the beginning. Then I awoke. I also saw in my dream 7 ears growing on one stalk, full and good. 7 ears, withered, thin, and blighted by the east wind, sprouted after them, and the thin ears swallowed up the 7 good ears. And I told it to the magicians, but there was no one who could explain it to me. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, 'The dreams of Pharaoh are one. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are one. The 7 lean and ugly cows that came up after them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears, blighted by the east wind, are also 7 years of famine. It is as I told Pharaoh. God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. There will come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. But after them there will arise 7 years of famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will consume the land, and the plenty will be unknown in the land by reason of the famine that will follow, for it will be very severe. And the doubling of Pharaoh's dream means that the thing is fixed by God, and God will shortly bring it about. Now, therefore," so Joseph, God gives Joseph the interpretation of these dreams, as God is wont to do. Joseph never claims to have the spiritual gift of dream interpretation. Not that Scripture ever defines one of that sort. But what Joseph does have is a reliance upon the Lord. He does interpret dreams for the guys in prison. As a young man, Joseph actually had dreams. It never actually says he interprets them. It's implied that the interpretation was known by his siblings and his father. But here, the designation that we saw previously in the passage before this was that he told Pharaoh God would interpret the dreams. God was going to do all the interpretation. All that Joseph was going to do was rely on the Lord. And so he does that here. He relies on the Lord. Lord gives him the interpretation, and he tells Pharaoh the dreams are the same. There's going to be 7 good years, followed by 7 bad years. And then, still relying on the Lord's guidance and wisdom, Joseph gives Pharaoh then instruction of how to get through the lean years. Look at verse 33. Now therefore, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man and set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers over the land and take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt during the 7 plentiful years. So basically give a 20% tax over the land of Egypt during the good years. There's going to be exceptionally good years. Take 1/5 during those years. Verse 35. And let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh for food in the cities, and let them keep it. The food shall be a reserve for the land against the 7 years of famine that are to occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish throughout the famine. So God is going to give so much food during the 7 good years that just 20% of that food will be enough to last not just the land of Egypt, but as we're going to see, those coming from the land of Canaan, like Jacob's family, Joseph's family, to also survive during the 7 poor years. Verse 37. This proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God?" So even Pharaoh and his servants recognize the power of God in Joseph. Joseph's reliance on God, recognize the Spirit of God speaking through Joseph. Verse 39. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has shown you all this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards the throne will I be greater than you." And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt." So now you see, Joseph is not just pulled out of prison by Pharaoh. Joseph is given this great position over the land of Egypt. You never have the instance of Pharaoh pulling Joseph out of prison except to come interpret these dreams. I guess the implication being pulling him out to interpret the dreams is Pharaoh pulling Joseph out of prison. But he says, "I am going to promote you from being prisoner to being second in command over all the land of Egypt." Verse 41. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand and clothed him in garments of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. And he made him ride in his second chariot. And they called out before him, "Bow the knee." Thus he set him over all the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, and without your consent no one shall lift up hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphenath-Paneah, and gave him in marriage Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On. So Joseph went out over the land of Egypt. So Pharaoh gives Joseph this massive promotion. And in the sight of everyone in his court, in the sight of his servants, it's recognized that Joseph has this authority, Joseph has this power, that it's obvious God's Spirit is on him. And so because of God's Spirit, because of Joseph's dependence upon God's Spirit, Pharaoh puts Joseph in this position so that Egypt will survive this terrible thing that's coming, these famines that are coming down the line. And in this promotion, he gives him an Egyptian name and an Egyptian wife, the daughter of the priest, the Egyptian priest. Verse 46, Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. During the 7 plentiful years, the earth produced abundantly. And he gathered up all the food of these 7 years which occurred in the land of Egypt and put the food in the cities. He put in every city the food from the fields around it. And Joseph stored up grain in great abundance, like the sand of the sea, until he ceased to measure it, for it could not be measured. So remember, they're taking in 1/5, so 20% of all the food that's produced during this period of time. But even the 1/5 that they are taking in, it says here, is so much they could no longer measure it. It says that, they measured it for a time, but then at some point, there, verse 49, they stopped measuring it because it was just too much to measure. They couldn't keep up with the demand that was coming in. There was too much to count. It kind of brings to mind, I don't know if you ever saw that old I Love Lucy episode where she and Ethel are trying to package up all the chocolates and the conveyor belt's coming too fast and they're stuffing chocolate in their clothes, stuffing it in their hats, stuffing it in their mouth. They're trying to just keep the chocolate from flying down the conveyor belt because it's too much for them to handle. And that's the image here. There's too much food for them to handle, too much food for them to count. God has given so much provision that they cannot keep account of all of the abundance. Verse 50. Before the year of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph. Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, the priest of On, bore them to him. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, For he said, God has made me forget all my hardship in all my father's house. So he says, God has made me forget the hardship of the past, the difficulty of the past, the problems of the past. And God has brought me to this point. Verse 52, the name of the second he called Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. So even though things were so difficult there in Egypt, he says, God has made me fruitful. God has brought abundance here in the midst of the affliction. Verse 53. The 7 years of plenty that occurred in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come. As Joseph had said, there was famine in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. When all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, go to Joseph. What he says to you, do. So again, Pharaoh reiterates the authority and power of Joseph. Verse 56. So when the famine had spread over all the land, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all the earth came to Egypt, to Joseph, to buy grain, because the famine was severe over all the earth. So it's not just the Egyptians coming, it's people from everywhere are coming. But God had been so generous during the 7 good years that there's more than enough food for everybody who's going to show up. Verse 1 of chapter 42. When Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, why do you look at one another? And he said, behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain for us there, that we may live and not die. So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt, but Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers, for he feared that harm might happen to him. Thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. So somehow word gets to Jacob that there's food in Egypt. So he says to his brothers, y'all stop looking at each other and complaining that there's no food. There's food in Egypt. Go down there and get food. You can all of you go down there except Benjamin. I'm going to keep Benjamin here. He's the son of Rachel, my favorite wife. The other son of Rachel, my favorite wife. He died, according to you guys. And so, I don't want the other one to die, but y'all can all go down there. That's fine. You all go down to Egypt, but I'm going to keep Benjamin back. He's afraid that his youngest would befall the fate that he believes has befallen Joseph. Verse 6. Now Joseph was governor over the land. He was the one who sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. Where do you come from? He said. They said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. Now, Joseph recognizes, they don't recognize him. It's been a number of years, right? It's been a very long time. Joseph was just a teenager when he left. Now he's a man in his upper 30s, possibly low 40s at this time. We don't know how much time has transpired yet. That will come. And he looks demonstratively different. They're all men who have beards grown out. Joseph at this time, being an Egyptian official, probably has his whole head shaved. And he's been out there working in Egypt, so he looks like an Egyptian. He's got an Egyptian name. So they don't recognize him at all, but he knows them. And so it says he spoke roughly to them. He remembers what they did. He remembers how they treated him. And so he speaks to them in a less than kind tone. Verse 8. And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he dreamed of them. And he said to them, you are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land. And they said to him, no, my lord, and your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies. He said to them, no, it is the nakedness of the land that you have come to see. And they said, we, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more. So they had assumed Joseph was dead, right? When they sold Joseph to those traders who were headed down to Egypt, that was all but a death sentence, and they assumed that Joseph had died going down there to Egypt. They didn't want to kill him themselves, but they knew sending him to Egypt was the equivalent to killing him. Verse 14. But Joseph said to them, "It is as I said, you are spies. By this you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him bring your brother while you remain confined, that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you. Or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies." And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. So he threw them in jail, or put them under house arrest, or however that shook out there. But he spoke so roughly to them when he learned he had, his brother, his youngest brother, Benjamin, was still alive. He says, "You've got to bring him to me. I'm going to keep you all here, and then I'm going to send one of you back to go get him." Now let's jump over to Matthew chapter 13, starting in verse 24. He, Jesus, put another parable before them, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while his men were sleeping, his enemy came, sowed weeds among the wheat, and went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared also. And the servants of the master of the house came and said to him, 'Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have weeds?' He said to them, 'An enemy has done this.' So the servants said to him, 'Then do you want us to go and gather them?' But he said, 'No, lest in gathering the weeds you root up the wheat among them.'" So in the parable, the enemies come in, they put these weeds there. The servant said, "You want us to go dig up all the weeds?" He said, and the master says, "No, we don't want the good crops to accidentally be torn up when you're tearing up the weeds." Verse 30, "Let both grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time, I will tell the reapers, gather the weeds first, bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barns." He says, so the time will come when you will separate the weeds from the harvest, from the good crop. Speaking of people, that there are believers and unbelievers functioning in this world at the same time, and at the time of the judgment, at the time of the end, we will be gathered up and separated. Those who believe to heaven, those who refuse to believe to punishment. Verse 31. He put another parable before them, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed that a man took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it has grown, it is larger than all the garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in his branches." So his kingdom starts small and can become exceedingly large through growth. Verse 33, he told them another parable. "The kingdom of heaven is like leaven that a woman took and hid in 3 measures of flour till it was all leavened." So a little bit, again, changes the whole. That's God's kingdom. A little bit can change everything. Verse 34. "All these things Jesus said to the crowds in parables. Indeed, he said nothing to them without a parable. This was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet." This is Isaiah. "I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter what has been hidden since the foundation of the world." So Jesus teaching in parables is, as many things he did, fulfillment of Scripture, prophecy. Verse 36. "Then he left the crowds and went into the house. And his disciples came to him, saying, 'Explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field.' He answered, 'The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed is the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. Just as the weeds are gathered and burned with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all lawbreakers." So all cause, I love that phrase is very interesting. All causes, those who cause sin, who instigate sin, who promote it and bring it about and further its cause and purpose. And throw them, verse 42, into the fiery furnace. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. Then in his joy he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. The kingdom of heaven is worth selling everything we have, getting rid of everything we have to pursue and follow after. The kingdom of heaven is worth pouring all of us into, everything that we are, into its cause and to its end. Verse 45. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls, who on finding one pearl of great value, went and sold all that he had and bought it. So again, selling all you have, pursuing it. Psalm 18, that's where we're going now. To the choir master, a psalm of David, the servant of the Lord, who addressed the words of this song to the Lord on the day when the Lord rescued him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. So in recognizing the Lord delivering him from his enemies, David writes these words. I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies. God has taken care of me, David is saying. Verse 4, the cords of death encompassed me. The torrents of destruction assailed me. The cords of Sheol entangled me. The snares of death confronted me. In my distress, I called upon the Lord. To my God, I cried for help. From his temple, he heard my voice, and my cry to him reached his ears. So I was going through some terrible stuff, and death was encompassing me. It was all around me, and I cried to God, and he heard me and rescued me. Verse 7, then the earth reeled and rocked. The foundations also of the mountains trembled and quaked because he was angry. Smoke went up from his nostrils and devouring fire from his mouth. Glowing coals flamed forth from him. He bowed the heavens and came down. Thick darkness was under his feet. He rode on a cherub and flew. He came swiftly on the wings of the wind. He made darkness his covering, his canopy around him. Thick clouds dark with water. Out of the brightness before him, hailstones and coals of fire broke through his clouds. Nothing can stand before the Lord when he comes to rescue those who call to him. Verse 13, the Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the Most High uttered his voice, hailstones and coals of fire. And he sent out his arrows and scattered them. He flashed forth lightnings and routed them. Then the channels of the sea were seen, and the foundations of the world were laid bare. At your rebuke, O Lord, at the blast of the breath of your nostrils. The earth gives way to God when he arrives in his presence. Proverbs chapter 4. Hear, O sons, a father's instruction, and be attentive that you may gain insight. For I give you good precepts. Do not forsake my teaching. When I was a son with my father, tender, the only one in the side of my mother, he taught me and said to me, let your heart hold fast my words. Keep my commandments and live. Get wisdom, get insight. Do not forget and do not turn away from the words of my mouth. Do not forsake her, and she will keep you. Love her, and she will guard you. So listen to wisdom, wisdom that comes from the Lord. Listen to the Lord who provides wisdom, and you will gain insight, and you will be kept in safety. Not in the sense of necessarily simply physical safety. You will be kept in spiritual safety. You will be guarded from spiritual attack when you are standing with the Lord. The attack will come, but the Lord will give you the protection you need to persevere under that attack. So thank you for checking out here day 20. Tomorrow we'll be on day 21 of our reading through the Bible every day. So check back tomorrow and we will continue to journey through God's Word together.